And welcome everyone to Rock M Radio, a brand new episode of Dive Cuts. Season 7 now. I believe a couple episodes I was still calling it season 6. We are on 7 seasons of Dive Cuts that you've been putting up with me. This is your host, Sam Snelling, and this guy to my right, your right on the screen, or if you're listening just through the regular podcast feed, just the other voice that you're about to hear, Matthew J. Harris. Matt, how are you?
I'm well. We're starting to see preseason polls and media days and certain writers on Twitter complaining about the location of where media days take place. It's a great time of year, and next week is sort of the start of it all. If you look kind of historically, we should start seeing loads of predictions, previews, all kinds of stuff coming. So we're getting close. We're starting to roll things out. So it's time to actually discuss real games of basketball that will involve tangible results that we care about and that our audience, we presume, cares about too. It's just a wonderful time.
Yeah, you assume if somebody is tuning into this that they actually they care about the games. Yeah, so we're recording this Tuesday, October 10th. It is officially preseason coverage time at Rock M Nation for Mizzou Basketball. Yesterday, on the 9th, we kicked off the player previews, courtesy of you. Data Mizzou, Matt Watkins did the majority of the writing. You were plugging in the necessary clips and providing context on those. The first sort of opening salvo, of course, where else could we go?
He's risen. He's risen.
Jesus Carolero Martin. Maybe it's Martin. We don't know. We just recently adjusted to adding the
and there's apparently there's a fourth name. There's a fourth name in there now as well.
We just call him Zeus.
Yeah,
that was his nickname. But yeah,
which is blasphemous and makes it even better. If you really is, there's all kinds of levels to this.
Greek
he hasn't
God,
played a game yet.
The Christian God. So it's been a while since you've been on the pod, or at least a couple episodes. Last time it was before Trent Burns had committed. Now Trent Burns is committed, and he is a Missouri Tiger. Matt Watkins and I kind of broke down a lot, and I know that you wrote about it, but you haven't had a chance to sort of give the folks a sort of audible on how you feel about Mr. Burns, and so you want to give a quick take?
It's a long-term bet, and I think you need to view it through that sort of lens. I guess I'm surprised that was a pickup, just because I think, as you and Mr. Watkins alluded to last week, would there have been maybe a little bit harder push to bring in another ball handler in this class? But that also gets you into a situation where you would be carrying 3 underclassmen, ball handlers on the roster. As I wrote in a piece last week that tried to sort of look at how this class might wrap up. I think that there's a pretty reasonable case to be made to go into the spring and look for a supplemental ball handler in the transfer portal. So if you were looking to get a little bit of experience at that spot and you had 2 spots open, you've already kind of, filled in a lot of places at the wing. I think, there have been some fans who who told me, oh, I really like Chase McCarty, or, oh, I really like Travis Perry. It's like, well, Perry is a young point guard and they were already young there. Chase McCarty is a wing I like a lot, but they've already got 4 or 5 guys. They're already kind of having a glut at that spot. I think people are going to say, well, now they have 3 centers. And the way I would frame it is the same way I would frame it as I did in the piece, which is, this is a staff right now that has not fallen in love with any bigs in 2025. And if you don't see anyone right now that you think is going to, surpass your forecast or your projection for Trent, just take that guy now and essentially say, we got our guy a year early. We're not going to take a big in 25. And that makes sense too, because you're not going to be taking Trent, expecting him to make a dent early. It's probably going to take him 1 or 2 years to really start scaling his developmental curve and his trajectory and start getting some altitude there. So if you feel like there's nobody in 25 you really want, if you feel like Burns fits with you stylistically, which I think he does, and he fits with, your MO as a staff, which this one's got a pretty good track record with these developmental type bigs that are going to take a while. I think it's a pretty reasonable bet, and I think it's a logical decision to make. So from a roster construction standpoint, I get it. Skill wise, Trent really only started to take off 5-6 months ago. His high school is an independent kind of charter school. I don't know if they've played the best schedules out there. They're not part of the UIL in Texas. So has he seen the best high school comp? The only full games I could find of him with PSAT were from November, December, January. Not really representative, I think, of where he is right now. But I think he, supplies a little bit of skill for him. I think he's going to have to, put on some weight. He's going to have to, develop a couple of reliable moves in the post right now. I think once that strength comes, that'll make that easier. But on balance, I think it's a reasonable long-term bet to make. And here's the deal. If he's not happy in a couple of years and goes into the portal, I think there are enough options around him, and the portal itself can yield you something to where you're okay. So I think in general, it makes sense from a skill fit perspective, from a developmental track record perspective, and just from how they want to build the roster. So I think on balance, it's a pretty good pickup, but I think fans need to understand that. And I think that's pretty much been the sentiment too, is this is a long-term move, and that's okay.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong if you can keep guys around. One thing that we have at least seen early on from Dennis Gates is there does seem to be a good amount of full roster buy-in. A lot of the guys that are on the team last year, on the team now. I mean, you look at a guy like Mabor Majak, who is just wherever Dennis Gates is going, he's going to go with him, and it's like, and really, realistically, Majak's a guy who could probably play a lot more if you're at a different level. Yeah. But he's more than content to just sort of be a part of the program. Yeah. And so I wonder, the portal is always going to be tempting, for guys that aren't playing. I've always sort of said that the best way to keep guys out of the portal is to constantly be talking to them about, their role and making sure that there's nothing that's unclear. And for a guy that you project as being, whatever they project Trent Burns to be, then I think it's a guy that you take and then you invest the time and energy, and you just make sure that he's bought into that vision. It's kind of like we've talked about with Jordan Butler. It's like we talked about Anthony Robinson. Those guys bought into this vision of, coming in and not really playing a whole lot as freshmen, but being part of that developmental chain and, and really kind of allowing themselves to be built up. And, and I mean, granted, those guys have to get to their sophomore year without going into the portal. And these days anything can happen. But at least early on, you're hearing guys kind of say all the right things, in and around, that discussion.
Yeah. And they're going to be young. They're going to have at least 8 underclassmen, barring, nobody from the 23 class leaving in the spring. And, part of me wonders if, what they found is the pitch and the culture that they have, the pitch they've made and the culture they have maybe has a little bit more resonance or salience with high school kids than with, veterans out of the portal. I do think that there's something to the idea that a veteran, even like Matt Cleveland, they know they're not going to be a lottery pick. They know kind of, they've gotten enough feedback now to understand where they are, in their, development towards a professional spot. And, for them, for a veteran like that, it might be, look, I need to go someplace where I know I'm going to get guaranteed minutes. guaranteed touches, and I'm going to get, a pretty robust paycheck, because chances are once I leave college, it's going to be scratching and fighting my way either through, abroad, or I'm going to be working my way through the G League to try and get on 10 days. Like, I just think the pitch that this staff has about development and about its culture, and, even to its system, being kind of egalitarian, spreading everything around, may have more of a, may sound better to high school kids, where, that culture and that scheme fit and that development still, have some importance and a priority in, decisions. And, where NIL isn't unimportant, but it's not, quite to the same level. So maybe I think they've, just over time found that they've been able to have, really good conversations and really good traction with high school kids. And, if those kids are bought in, that's a niche that's out there. There's not a lot of, programs that I think are really still leaning on the idea that they can bring in a lot of kids between 50 and 100 in the composite and turn them into a core. If this staff can do that, there's a lot of yield there, but we'll see. We see if they can do it.
Yeah. I think that's definitely kind of like the part of this that, maybe a lot of people don't want to discuss, is like, there's definitely a wait and see component. Like, it all sounds good when you have a kid who says that he's gonna buy in and sort of be okay sitting for a year, maybe 2 years, and not playing a whole lot, but the development is going to happen, and this is where you maybe project them, but they got to get there. And again, like, I feel from what you kind of sense around the program and all those sorts of things, that at least those things are going well early.
It's not just lip service right now. Now, it's not just lip service.
So it is pivoting very, very hardly to our preseason coverage. I know that there wasn't anything else that we needed to hit on recruiting.
No, I think the best way,
I think
Jaden Quaintance has, said to a couple of national recruiting writers that, it's likely he's going to go into the spring before he makes a decision. That's not really shocking, not uncommon for top 10 guys with his sort of, offers and sort of, decisions that he might have. And
guys who are considering
the G
alternatives to college.
Yeah. So the G League might
come back. Will wait it out too. Like that, they're not.
That's partly why the board, I think, has emptied, because all parties have understood that there's one spot and who that spot is intended for. So, barring a swerve in Quaintance's process, I'd expect that to last at least past signing day in a couple of weeks. We're looking at a signing class of 5 in the fall. In 2025, they have hosted some in-state kids earlier this year in the winter, but it doesn't look like a lot of them outside of Nick Randall have like blossomed up or sort of stayed really high on the board and in the mix there. They had Efiosa Oliogu, a top 40, high 4-star level wing on campus last weekend, but there are murmurs that he's a reclass candidate and moving into 24. As we just mentioned, there's one spot and one guy. So if Oliogu decides that he wants to make the jump into 24, it's likely not Missouri. I feel, I'll always leave that wiggle room, but I think everybody sort of understands what I'm saying. If he moves into 24, it's probably somewhere else. Outside of that, we're in for the usual long haul sort of process, and waiting to see what happens. Aaron Rowe is up there. Aaron Rowe has been here multiple times in unofficial capacities. He has sometimes on these road trips home brought along his 5-star friends from Link to work out with his trainer. He's, I think there's a lot of confidence, all around that, Rowe ultimately ends up in Columbia. Whenever that happens, we'll see. If that happens, it remains to be seen, but I think there's confidence early there. And then really after that, it's kind of hard to project what they want to do, because they're going to have 8 freshmen. It's hard to project more than one class out at how many spots they're going to need, what needs they're going to have. But there's about 10 names on the board that I think that they're sort of looking at already. But, again, still early days there. We'll see what happens. We'll see, if there are any more officials that are scheduled during the season, getting guys on campus to see what the environment's like when games are being played, I think that's something that the staff did last year. They were what we hadn't seen for a long time, which was lots of foot traffic in during the regular season. So maybe we see more of that. But otherwise, for right now, looking like a 5-man class will sign on, I think, November 8 or November 10. Then you wait to see if Quaintance is available. Then we go into portal season. So I think that's how 24 is going to shake out.
Cool.
Yeah. It's always Cruton all the time. Pivot.
Moving on. Yeah, because I think like you and I are both like very, very, very much ready for basketball games to happen.
Yeah.
Like I was at the point where like I was watching some minutes of like some of the NBA preseason action that has sort of popped up here and there, just champing at the bit.
Man, I was doing late fourth quarter Hoosiers, not Hoosiers, but Rockets Pacers. That's what I was doing. That's how desperate the fix got the other day.
Yeah, the preseason stuff is actually pretty interesting because that's usually where you get all your college stars and and guys that were really good, recognizable names that a lot of folks probably listening to this podcast would recognize. Less so when those guys are like going to like the Australian league for a year or two. But yeah, so like preseason is heating up. Next week is the SEC Media Days, where we'll kind of see where the media decides to slot the Tigers. There has been some newsworthy rostery type things. EJ Jarvis, the Yale transfer who chose Florida, a guy that I think they were really kind of counting on to be a fixture in the rotation, if not a starter, decided to walk away from basketball.
That Yale degree makes that certainly an understandable decision.
It's not necessarily a bad decision, it's like there is something to be said for a guy sort of like knowing when to call it, and like maybe he's done, or maybe he just wants to maybe try being a pro, whatever. Like it's going to be, I mean, he did sort of say like he's walking away from basketball. So that seems to me like he's going to just go get a job and be a dude. So he's out. Thankfully, I had like just started on my Florida preview, so I can factor that in. And then I think probably the bigger news is, an all SEC level big, Tolu Smith, a guy that, has frustrated us watching him, beat up the Tigers over the years, has a foot injury and is going to be out until at least the beginning of the start of the SEC conference schedule. Tolu, this is a big loss for Mississippi State. A team that was bringing back everybody from an NCAA tournament team last year, and a team that was hoping to sort of kind of take another step forward. And, from, I think, kind of like a rough year for their scoring. I think anybody that paid close attention to that team knows that, their issue was not on defense. And so losing a guy that you could count on for scoring certainly will raise some eyebrows and might make for a tough non-conference slate. And then, as we also know, Matt, foot issues never linger, especially with bigs.
No, they come back and they're even better than ever. More light on their feet, more agile, more reliable.
It's a tough injury.
It is. The Jarvis decision, I think Florida fans can console themselves, or will console themselves, with the fact that they, still have Micah Hamilton and Tyrese Samuel as transfer pickups.
I believe like half of their roster are post players.
It's that, by God, Colin Castleton went down, and Todd wasn't going to be caught out again. But Hamilton is a guy that we liked in the portal. Missouri reached out, but he was a guy that was more of a defensive kind of weapon, really mobile, can guard all 5 spots. But every time you put on the tape or you read a scouting report of him, or you even looked at his synergy profile, it was, the offense needs to come along. And Tyrese Samuel is a guy that I thought Missouri should kick the tires on as just a depth piece really good rebounder, tough guy, not really a fulcrum of your offense. EJ Jarvis, the one thing he did was he was kind of that hybrid 4-5 guy. He could step out and shoot it. Had a little bit of a handle, could drive some bigs. He was kind of that guy that if you think of how Todd Golden played at San Francisco with bigs that had some skill, he kind of fit that. And now that's not there. I think now you're going to put even more pressure on Florida's backcourt. Riley Kugel's expected to break out. Will Richard is still there. They added kind of a heavy usage guard in Zion Pullen and Walter Clayton's there. So I think they've got options in the backcourt. But realistically, you look at this roster now, it's what, 6 guys maybe? 6 guys.
Depth is a concern.
Depth is a concern because they do have some guys they've brought in, but they're all sort of like mid 3-star guys, that we're gonna need time. 7, I think, most teams now sort of say that most coaches say they want to play 10 guys. Rotations wind up between 7 and 9. There's not a lot of wiggle room now for Todd if there's injuries, especially if one of those guards doesn't hit in the backcourt. If Walter or Zion doesn't quite translate up, they could be in a bind there. On Mississippi State, Andrew Taylor was a pretty perky scoring guard at Marshall. Point guard can create some stuff, but man, I'm looking at it now here. It's still projecting DJ Jeffries at 12.6 points per game. Deshaun Davis at 10.4, Cam Matthews, Shaquille. We've seen these guys play. We've seen these guys try and play under 2 different staffs. The results have not been efficient or consistent offense.
Right. And I feel like that's also kind of part of it is are you not going to play Cam Matthews? He can't score at all, but
what
he
choice
couldn't come off the floor last year. He played a lot, and he made.
They're looking at Jimmy
offensively.
Bell. Jimmy Bell,
yeah,
as the starting center for them, and we had abundant questions about Jimmy when Missouri was kicking that tire. So big material differences there, and why we're spending a lot of time on them. These are 2 teams that are in the same kind of range as where Missouri is probably going to be in preseason forecasts. And we're not even October 15, and they've taken pretty substantial hits to the rotation. Meanwhile, in Oxford, Sam, they still have not heard word on waiver requests for Moussa Cisse or Brandon Murray. Those are not immaterial to them. I think 10 days ago, it was reported that Jalen Cook had still not heard word at LSU on his waiver. That's a biggie for Matt McMahon, because even with Cook sort of potentially considered a possibility, they're being picked 10th or 11th. These are all teams that are 4 teams that are sort of floating in the same range as Missouri, and all of them looking at taking major hits to guys that were supposed to be key rotation pieces. And if you're Missouri, that opens up the window for you, because I think the chief critique of Missouri has been, well, who's their key cog? Well, if the teams around them are having to rely on depth, there might be some questions there. So Missouri might have, in aggregate, more, pieces that can, give them, production to exploit this. We'll see. Tolu is supposed to be back. But, man, guys coming off foot injuries usually face minutes restrictions early. They're rusty. Is Tolu, going to be able to make a difference for, a team that, they open with South Carolina, but then they immediately dive into Tennessee, Alabama, Kentucky, Florida, and Auburn. It is not an easy entry for Mississippi State into SEC play. So as we get close to the end of as we get into preview season, major news for some teams that Mizzou fans should care about outside of Columbia.
Yeah, when you're talking about like slotting teams, so my plan as the guy who sort of, writes all these team previews. I mean, so for anybody that wants to peek behind the curtains, the three of us have like an ongoing conversation. I think we usually kind of end up like on the same page, basically talk each other into our own beliefs, right? And we usually sort of land on on an order,
Yeah.
for how the order is going to play out. Like we all do our SEC games, pick them. We see where they're at, and then we kind of tweak until we're happy with an order that I think we are all happy with. From there, that's when I kind of start writing all the previews, and so yeah, so I do the bulk of the previews. I leave like the player stuff to you guys, and as I'm kind of going through these previews, like I haven't gotten to Florida yet, which I'm thankful for because to me, like Jarvis is a significant loss. I haven't gotten to Mississippi State, and even though Tolu is coming back, having a foot injury as a big does sort of change my opinion on them a little bit. I'm probably not going to change the order on how anybody is ranked at this point. It's probably just too late. You'll just kind of have to throw caveats into the writing, be like, okay, like this order was decided. But I did get to like Ole Miss is written, LSU is written, and having written those teams, not knowing what's going to happen with Jalen Cook or Musa Cisse, Brandon Murray at Ole Miss, is really, really tough. Fortunately for like Ole Miss, I think you look at the fact that they do have Jamarian Sharp, and then Rashad Marshall, and I think they could also do some things with maybe they play with Jamin Brakefield at the 5.
Yeah.
And then and I just wrote this too. Is like there's some other sort of big combo forward that they can kind of stick at the 5 and sort of play that way. My bigger concern with them is at the point guard spot where they've got Jalen Murray, who's a transfer from St. Peter's. They've got Austin Nunez, who's a transfer from Arizona State. Nunez is not really a point guard. He's more of a combo scoring guy. But if you look at them like 2 through 4, like that roster is fantastic. If they get Cisse and they get Brandon Murray, like that's they're like a point guard away from being probably like a top 4 finish in the league. But looking at LSU, it gets really dicey for how they're going to get points.
That backcourt's terrible defensively. It is not good.
Right. It's just like, so like if you're already sort of like leaky defensively,
you need all the buckets.
And you go and you get Will Baker, who, like is a pretty skilled offensive guy, but is not stopping anybody. Then you better be able to score. And I like that. To me, like, if Cook isn't able to get the waiver, I think that probably hurts LSU way more than Ole Miss not getting Cisse or Murray.
Yeah. And it's with Ole Miss, again, the point guard position's there. Alan Flanagan is not a sexy transfer portal pickup, but he is a, road-tested SEC guard. You can play him at the 2 or the 3. They're going to, they'll have some interesting combos at the 4 and the 5.
And he did not entirely successfully, but did play some point guard at Auburn.
That was,
I think when what was the point guard that they the COVID year?
I can't remember, but who was in and out. I can't remember, but it was.
But yeah, so he would play some point guard when that guy was out. Totally blanking.
Otherwise, yeah, I think for LSU, it's going to be mission critical if they don't get Jalen Cook. I know that they've got Carlos Stewart coming in. They've got Jordan Wright. But how many years have we done the SC preview and we said, "Oh, Jordan Wright, keep an eye out for him," and somebody else on the Vanderbilt roster jumps out and sort of becomes an impact player. I
think the book on Jordan Wright is basically that he's a good player, and I think he'll provide for them leadership when things inevitably kind of get a little bumpy, as they really did in Baton Rouge last year. I think they probably missed somebody who could, sort of circle the wagons a little bit, amongst the players. And I'm thinking that that's kind of what Matt McMahon is hoping to kind of get from somebody like Jordan Wright. He'll give you 8 to 12 points, 4 to 5 rebounds. Hopefully he can shoot 37-ish% from 3-point range, and be a reliable player. But yeah, like he's not the difference. What's that?
I was going to say Carlos Stewart was kind of the same guy. He was 14 points per game at Santa Clara, but Brandon Pajinski
really good on catch and shoots.
Really good at catch and shoots, but you need somebody to crack the defense open to get him those catch and shoots.
to kick the ball out to him for catch and shoots.
And that's what Jalen Cook is good at doing. So
ideally that would have been Jalen Cook.
Yeah. So the McMahon era down there is interesting because they've gotten a couple nice recruiting pickups this fall, but it just feels like this, I've said in our thread, Sunset could get to the McMahon regime pretty quickly, in Baton Rouge if, it's looking like they're going to be probably picked 11th or 12th this year, coming off a 14th place finish last year. They're going to have some, guys in the 50 to 75 range of the composite come in. But, it's expectations get ramped up pretty quickly there. So it'll be interesting to see. This is kind of a quiet swing year. And also, they still haven't replaced a staffer who left to go coach a G League team. They only have 2 assistants right now. So LSU's in an interesting place. We'll say that much. But as we get toward preview season, lots of things swirling around Missouri that I think, folks should, be aware of and pay attention to as we start to see more of, forecasts start, getting released, and we start compiling them I start compiling them to sort of give, kind of a consensus view. But the last couple weeks have not been without some news, that could have some downstream consequences on Missouri.
Mm-hmm. Sharif Cooper.
Yeah.
That was who the name we were trying to think. Same high school class as Dylan Cardwell. If everybody remembers, Dylan Cardwell, still on the Auburn roster. He's actually going to be a senior this year. But yeah, Sharif Cooper was the guy who was kind of in and out of the lineup. And when he was not in the lineup, sophomore Alan Flanagan was sort of like the de facto point guard. And that's why they lost 14 games that year.
So it was not a good year. It was, but it'll be interesting to see where Missouri gets slotted. Right now, I think probably it's safe to say they're getting locked between the 7 and 10 range in a lot of places, which is sort of back into the bubble to the NIT range, which, we'll see how many get filled in, but I don't think that where I've seen Missouri outside of Lindy's, I think a lot of people are sort of viewing Missouri as a team that's, going to be okay-ish, but they have some big questions and they got to resolve them. But people, even with losing Kobe Brown and losing 70% of their production, their average finish is probably still going to be 2 spots higher than it was last year. So congrats, Dennis Gates. You earned a little bit of equity when people pick you in the preseason. Just what you play the games for. Writer equity when preseason polls come out.
What was the Dolphins coach? What was his quote?
We was playing all year to be, the best statistical output through 5 games. That's what we're doing this for.
Yeah, that was like the NFL presser quote of the season so far. Not that I'm a guy that pays a lot of attention to the NFL, but I saw that. I'm like, that is excellent. So I think we're gonna wrap this up because there's not really a whole lot going on. Practice is ongoing. Really, probably within like a couple weeks, we'll have a lot more to talk about. Although I am not going to be available for a podcast next week. If you all are really nice and tweet at Matt Harris and at Data Mizzou, maybe they'll get online and do a podcast for you guys. Otherwise, you're probably looking at 2 weeks.
We'll just share our favorite spreadsheets with everyone. It'll be
there's a little button on this this thing where you can do just that.
Yeah, just take you through our all-time favorite spreadsheets and just really lift the lid to show you how we make the wonky stuff that we presume that you read. We think you read it, so we'll have
the traffic on Jesus was pretty good.
Just a lot of people looking for salvation. That's what you can say. That's what
that might be it. Maybe
coming to see the gospel.
Oh man, like that would have been actually really good SEO to sort of plug in there. Something, make a headline, something about Jesus saves.
Yeah. Jesus
missed opportunity.
Not really, because sometimes the turnover rate's a little high. But you know what? Jesus was a giving soul. That's taketh and giveth, especially giveth when you're playing Duke or North Carolina State. I'm going. This is why I'm a blasphemer, and I'm going to hell.
Yeah, I'm gonna say we should probably wrap this off before we anger somebody. So thanks everybody for tuning in. Any angry tweets go at this guy. I barely even look at Twitter anymore. You can find me on Blue Sky. Just at Sam Snelling, whatever it is.
You can find me at this old Blue Sky. That's where I'm at now.
Hey, yeah, I check it, once a day. It's nice. It's de-Twitterfying is actually, I think, very healthy. So I recommend it for anybody that has been looking for a way to switch off. Just delete Twitter from your phone. That's a good start. So back next week. Maybe if it's somebody else, I will definitely be back in 2 weeks. And at that point, we are going to be heavy in preview mode. And at some point, we got to get Blake back on to do our epic long SEC look. And then hopefully we'll get some sneaky rumors out about, some exhibition action. Because I know that Missouri is heading up to Chicago again to play Marquette. Is that right?
Yeah, that's not the neutral site game, Chicago alums. It's not the neutral site game.
It's not a ticketed event.
Not a ticketed event. Maybe if you are like a really good TSF donor, maybe they're looking to bring those in.
Yeah.
It's year-end gift season. If you really want that ticket, maybe you can write a 5-figure check and get yourself a ticket. But this is not it. There's probably no neutral site game for Chicago next year either. So just relax. Just relax.
If you see me on the streets of Chicago this weekend, you can say hi. That's why I'm not available for a podcast. I'm not going to be around. So we're done. Goodbye, everybody.
Adios.
Thank you, everyone, for tuning into Rock M Radio, a proud partner of Fans First Sports Network. If you enjoyed this episode and would like to see more just like it beamed directly into your personal device, just click the subscribe button below. And you can find this podcast through the Apple Podcast app or for iPhone, or the Google Podcast app for Android, or whatever app you use to listen to your podcast. We are also available on Spotify. Just search for Rock M Radio. And if you like other sports, Fans First Sports Network is a podcast network that has coverage of all other teams, Major League Baseball, MLS, NFL, whatever you want to listen and read about. It is a great network full of really fantastic podcasts. So look them up and subscribe to any and all of those podcasts. Rock M Radio will be back with more episodes coming soon. Thanks.